Thank you all for being with us for Bridging the Search from the Buscadoras Research Unit. My name is Nara Milanish. Hopefully everybody can hear and everything is functioning and tech is behaving this evening. I'm director of the Center for Mexico and Central America, CEMECA, a newly baptized center, previously known as the Center for Mexican Studies. I wanted to welcome you all and just very briefly introduce our event this evening. And if I could ask one of our assistants to put CEMECA's information in the chat when you get a chance. So CEMECA, the Center for Mexico and Central America, is a hub of scholarly activities about Mexico and Central America at Columbia University, but it's also a lab for exploring the intersection of academic research on the one hand and advocacy and activist work on and in the region. So this year, CEMECA is supporting a series of what we're calling applied academic research projects that tackle some of the region's most pressing challenges, including state violence within and across borders, corruption, forced migration and the criminalization of migration, et cetera. So CEMECA, for example, helps projects hire student assistants on campus and helps them liaise with other resources and expertise around the university, as you'll see tonight. Of course, the Buscadoras is one of 5 projects that we are supporting as a center this academic year. So tonight's event is the first in a series to bring those projects to the public. We want to share some of the findings and work that these projects are doing with you all, the public. So the series of which this event is a part is entitled From Area Studies to Country Conditions, Mexico, Central America, and the Uses of Regional Knowledge. So the purpose of this workshop series is to hear about the supported projects, their objectives, their methods, and perhaps maybe some preliminary findings. But it's also a space to reflect critically on what it means to join academic research on the one hand to advocacy and activist work on the other. What does it mean to conduct investigation in and out of the academy with partners outside of the academy? And I don't necessarily expect our speakers this evening to address those kind of sort of big questions unless they want to, but perhaps these questions will come up in the Q&A after they're done. So please follow us at CEMECA. We'll drop the information in the chat momentarily. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers this evening. First of all, we have Mónica Trigos Padilla, who has a master's in public administration from SIPA at Columbia. The School of International and Public Affairs. Everyone tosses around acronyms without explaining them. Second, we have Greg Odom, who is a PhD student in anthropology at Columbia, studying crime and policing in Guatemala. And finally, Alex Gil is a digital scholarship librarian at Columbia, where he collaborates with faculty, students, and fellow librarians in humanities research, pedagogy, and knowledge production that involves the use of advanced computation, digital media design, and network technologies. So they are part of the Buscadoras Research Unit, and I'd like to turn the rectangle over to them. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Nara, and thanks everyone to be here and to be part of our presentation. And let me share my screen. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay. So we are the team, Alex Gil, Greg Odom, and myself, as Nara mentioned. Thank you very much for the support from the Center for Mexico and Central America Studies from Columbia. We want to present the project that we're doing that's called Bridging the Search, the Buscadoras documentation project, and let you know of a brief history of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and where we're standing right now. Okay, so first we want to give you a little bit of context of what we're working on. We are focusing our project in Mexico, since there are like nearly 100,000 people that have disappeared in the country. There have been families that have needed to organize themselves in groups that are called colectivos, and also they call themselves buscadoras or searchers. And this has been given due to the lack of the authorities' work or activities, to bureaucracy, and also to the impunity that the country lives and the context of violence that we are experimenting. So these groups of families are looking for their loved ones, and they are developing like search methods, psychosocial support systems, generating protocols to navigate institutions, and like applying political pressure and taking the lead by their own hands as the principal agents that are searching for the disappeared. So this has been happening for a long time, and they have been gathering together, doing all of these activities to be able to find their loved ones, and developing a lot of experience and different abilities, and gaining different skills in knowing how to search, but also how to advocate with the government, raise awareness, and also consolidate groups of solidarity or people that want to become part and help and support together to look for their loved ones. So what we did last year, we created the Buscadoras Research Unit, created by Professor Claudio Lopnitz from the Department of Anthropology. And it was created in the fall of 2020 in conjunction with Greg, and I was there, and also Professor Monica Castillejos from the University of California, Berkeley. We, with the leadership of the Professor Claudio Lopnitz, we launched a call for applications for students that were also like interested in doing research and collaborating, and also a team like of volunteers organized with the objective of supporting like these missing person organizations operating in Mexico and Central America today. So a main group was gathered. We called it the research unit, and we created like different activities to know where the topic was, the context, and also collaborating and constructing and building together with the colectivos, and also with a university in Mexico called the Universidad Autónoma de México. What we did mainly during that year was the development of this research collaboration with one specific colectivo called Regresando a Casa Morelos, offering like the students' time, the skill sets, and like our perspective, but mainly, like our understanding and support, and in doing different chores together with them to learn the context, and also to provide like different skills that we had. Our main projects was, we had like some interviews with this colectivo to understand their work over the years. So we created a capsula, which is like a brief video of not only their work, but also their contribution to the creation of the Ley de Víctimas, Law of Victims in Mexico, and what had been their work over the years doing awareness and advocacy, and also parallel to that, doing the search of their loved ones in live search, which is the name, or also doing the search in different places. So that was one part of the work that we did. Also, we have helped with the digitalization of some documents that help with their information that the colectivo had. On the other hand, we created like some workshops about different courses of tools of psychosocial information and different things that were necessary, like pedagogical information. And together we created an event together with the Center for Mexican Studies before it became the Center for Central American Studies, and organizing this 3-day event conference with solidarity organizations, family collectives, researchers, and journalists to share like the various projects and concerning the topic, and to strengthen the networks of collaboration to grow the public interest.
I think it's important to mention here that when we started this research, we very much did not know exactly how we were going to fit in. It's worth it to say that Claudio Lomnitz had spent some time with this particular person that we spent most of our time running interviews with from Morelos, discussing what we could do with a project or a group like the Buscadoras Research Unit. And initially, it became evident that we could use our resources, our standings and position here at an academic institution to come up with these capsulas, these videos, which it seems pretty straightforward, but these capsulas themselves, among the different groups and the colectivos that are searching for the disappeared, who have alliances with, or who can themselves do this, or have alliances with journalists or people who do video editing or produce videos, that creating these capsulas is a very common way of circulating information about what the colectivos are doing and why they're doing it, and the types of things that they're up against through social media and on the internet. So that's why we fell on the Capsule Creation as a major component of what we were doing with the BRU. It's also worth it to say, throughout this year of research, we were speaking with a lot of different research groups and scouring the different databases that they're creating. And some of them are more official than others, but nonetheless, at the end of the day, a lot of these organizations were not completely interconnected. The work that they were producing was good, but it didn't necessarily speak to the other work that was being done. Sometimes very much so, but on the whole, by and large, a lot of this data was disaggregated. So due to the poor intercommunication and the disaggregation of data and the needs of listening directly to some of the buscadoras about their needs, we came up with the idea for this event to have everybody meet each other. I'm sorry, I was taking notes, Monica, and I came in and interrupted you. Or no, I'm good. Yeah. So we had the event to try to get people to meet each other. And we invited multiple members from colectivos. We had a 3-day event. We had up to 15 different research organizations, and we just gave them 5 to 10 minutes apiece to explain what they were doing. And at the end of each day, we broke the audience up into breakout rooms. And what we did just before we did that, we sent around a Google Doc and asked everybody to sign up in the particular room that they would like to go to speak to each project or each individual project. We imagined it as some sort of virtual job fair type organization framework. And we had slated about 40 minutes or to an hour for that conversation, but some of these conversations lasted an hour and a half afterwards. And everybody left these groups, these meetings, extremely energized and excited. So we thought about that. And then we thought about the needs that we had been listening to coming from different buscadoras and members of colectivos when we wanted to create the Bridging the Search project that we're on now. Can you, next slide. There we go. So Monica did the wonderful, difficult work of tracking down different sources for funding to do projects like this that we at this time, just after the event in May in the summer, we had just had an idea of what we wanted to do. But once we found the Magic grant offered by the Brown Institute, which is a bicoastal grant offered at Stanford and Columbia, and they have collaborative projects as well as projects individually in Columbia and Stanford, we decided to write an application, and it turns out that our project was a good enough idea for them to throw money behind. So thank God for that, and thanks to everybody at the Brown Institute. What we wanted to do was create an online toolkit that not necessarily satisfied. We want to be humble here, but spoke to a lot of the needs and the issues that we had witnessed that we had come to discover. So we wanted a bilingual portal that was meant to reach audiences internationally, not just the audiences in Mexico that very much understand or at least experience or see the terrible phenomena of disappearance in their daily lives in their country, but also in the United States, specifically the United States, because of the massive, migration and the potential for people to be in the United States that are touched by this phenomena of disappearance, and that may want to engage in the search but can't because they are on this side of the border. We also wanted to just generally raise an awareness across the globe to the English and Spanish speaking populations. So the parts that you can go to the next one. What we ended up coming up with was right here, there are 3, but we think of them as 4. So capsulas and oral histories, we kind of think of that as 2 components that are very closely related. The capsulas, we wanted to create up to 7 to 10 capsulas about different topics that we wanted, that we could tell stories about and use interviews and direct quotes and footage to show not only what the colectivos are doing, but how they do it in a way that informs people that may know very little about it, as well as informs or spreads information among people that know a lot about it. But most importantly, we wanted to create these as some sort of educational, pedagogical tool for people coming into the search for the disappeared, should they have to find, sadly, a way to get into this world, how to get to these resources that have been sort of crowdsourced and exchanged among these different colectivos. And we wanted to be able to base our entire project and everything that we do to be as useful for the person who is coming in to the search, who needs to learn things, to a fellow researcher, to a solidarity organizer, to a colectivo or a buscadora that has been searching for a long time. The oral history component, we wanted to maximize the effectiveness of the, which we'll get into this later, of the research that we're doing on the ground, of running interviews, to sort of emphasize the worlds and the stories that people come from before they find themselves in this lifestyle of searching, because it's very much a lifestyle that lasts their entire lives, or until they find the person or find some sort of information about what happened, about their disappeared loved one. We can get into this in the Q&A, that it's a little bit sticky here because of the security concerns, but ultimately what we wanted to do was to show that, to give another dimension to the way that we're telling this story, that it's happening in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons, and people have multifarious perspectives and experiences from it. Another component is the interactive map and the data visualization. We're working with ITAM, we'll get into this and we'll break down the acronym later. We're working with a university and a colleague in Mexico who has a gang of students working with us, and they're cleaning data that they're pulling from different research organizations, solidarity organizations, and institutional resources, things like the government database of disappearance or crime or what have you. And we're working to pull this and put this data into a map that we can cross-reference different types of data with. Mainly, we're looking at the formation of colectivos, when, where, and how, with what frequency, and how many colectivos are forming in certain parts of Mexico. And we want to create a map that we can cross-reference this data with for example, certain types of violence, femicide or something in a particular region in a particular year, or we wanted to cross-reference it with different types of legislation. The reason that we're focusing on the formation of colectivos themselves is because it soon became evident after speaking with different experts and anthropologists and the advisors that you can't really do what we wanted to do originally, which was to create a map of disappearances. But because of the contested nature of what we're dealing with, the definition of disappearance is actually pretty ambiguous when you get down to it. So we wanted to focus on something that we could back up and find through ethnographic, or at least ethnographic adjacent research. Then the repository and the directory sit as sort of a composite form of one component. The repository, we wanted to create a curated set of data, documents, information, anything from manuals that have come out of the colectivos or solidarity organizations that they have written for people who are just coming into the search, to the government data that is trustworthy or not trustworthy, and present them in a way to show examples of the types of things that people who are coming onto the search or doing research about the search or on disappearance will understand or have an idea of what they're going to encounter in terms of the data that is out there in the documentation that they have access to. And then the directory is again, another curated list of allies and collaborators that we work with, as well as beyond that, of people that are working to help people come onto the search, working to help people continue their own search efforts. And just so that the whole, at the end, what we want with the end is a toolkit that you can touch every single component, at least to begin imagining what you can do to start your search, or to start your research, or to start doing further, or to start writing stories about this, just a general education for a journalist, for example. Oh, whoops, we already had a slide for this, but no, here's the progress to date. So we've got 100. We have 21 interviews from 4 different states in Mexico. We have a team on the ground there that has been doing amazing work, one of which is a student here in the anthropology department, Marina Alamo Bryan, who does amazing stuff, and her dissertation research is on the search in Mexico. And they've been running interviews with particular members of different colectivos to get their stories. And as they've been doing that, we've been taking them here and transcribing them with the members of the BRU, as well as our investigative team, which is basically the non-BRU version of the BRU. It's the Bridging the Search version. But to give you an idea, everybody on our investigative team is the ex-BRU members from last year. And we're working on coding and analyzing these interviews so that we can use this these documents that we're creating to better create capsulas in the future, not just the capsulas that we intended to make this year, but should we have the opportunity to make more later, that we'll be able to create more with this using the same footage, because we have a lot of footage, folks, and we will have a lot more. Data and map, we're working with data cleaning right now, and we're the preliminary analysis coming from the class in Mexico. The directory and the repository, we're still curating lists. This is one of the more difficult parts of the project, because it's kind of like, it's really, at the same time you need to see the forest, you also need to see the trees, and it's kind of a wall of texts and data that you don't know is trustworthy. But as we develop it further, as we continue working and develop an understanding of the situation, this is going to prove to be a lot more simple. For example, speaking with our solidarity organizations, talking to them about particular data sets coming from a specific place, they can say, oh, that's good data only when you're talking about this, for example, versus that, because they don't do it. And this is all common knowledge that circulates among the people that are in this world. And again, one of the purposes of this website is to sort of centralize that knowledge and to just offer an introduction to it. And the web development, Alex will get into this in just a second, where it's in progress and it's looking pretty good. We've got a basic structure. The next one's that, right? There we go.
Thank you, Greg. So we have been working in 2 teams doing some of the web components. One of the teams is all here, Sandra Bermudez and me. We make up the sort of web development team for the larger structure of the site. Sandra's there in the audience. She told me not to ask her to come on camera, so I won't. But hi, Sandra. So Sandra is from Mexico, though she is doing this work while in Chicago this year. And together we've been kind of building this infrastructure that ensures the things things you see in the slide already. We want to make sure that the project is accessible to people with mobile phones on the ground in Mexico, because we intuit that most of the people that are going to be accessing the site will probably have cell phones. So we're building what is called a mobile first website. We are also doing this in a way that actually can survive us, can survive the presence of a web development team, which is a mistake that a lot of people who make these types of projects make, is imagine that there will always be a web development team around. And that's why we see a lot of these projects in disrepair online, where we actually are using a completely different approach to this, and we're imagining the project to actually survive us, the web development team, so that it won't need any security or maintenance updates after we are long gone. You should still have access to all the files and maps and visualizations. So one of the things that is interesting here is that also we have to be very careful about the sort of design choices we make, so that the website comes as respectful and accessible to the people who are going to be using it, because the theme, the subject matter is not only one that that asks us to think of accessibility to everybody on the ground, regardless of the technological literacies they may or may not have. We also have to be mindful of the fact that this is a very difficult situation which people find themselves in. So we want to make sure that everything that we do communicates that seriousness. And if you click to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about what the structure is. The structure is more or less decided by the sort of 3 components that are more like 4 or 5, depends on how you count, that Greg was mentioning. But basically you arrive at a home page that's going to have summaries of all the different components, and those summaries will serve as a sort of menu link that will take you to all the other parts of the website. There's going to be your standard about page and credits page. And then we're going to have a section dedicated to the interactive material. That's mostly the maps and visualizations. Another section will be dedicated to the repository. Still haven't decided where exactly the directory will go. It will probably go as another category here. And then there's the section about the oral histories and capsules. Each of these different sections operates on a different logic. So capsules is more what we call it in sort of technical terms, the exhibit portion, in which these videos will be accompanied by narratives that actually frame the capsules. The document repository will operate more like a digital library, and I'm hoping that most of the people in the audience have seen this type of genre where you just have a hi Erica, would you mind muting? So so people will be able to sort of browse through each of the different items, or search for keywords and find them. And the maps and visualization, it is the one that is a little bit out of our hands, out of Sandra and my hands, because that's the one that involves the second team. That portion is being done by the ATEM team that Greg was mentioning. And we actually have a meeting next week to discuss how that's going to play out. But if you pass to the next slide, then we can pass on to this kind of bigger picture about all the different teams that are involved here. This is one of the things that is fascinating to me about this project, is that it's bringing in so many different sectors of society, industries, in order to make the project happen. Our little web development team is just one of the many teams that are involved. And our Greg has already passed through several of them. But each of these teams actually tries to bring in the people with the necessary expertise to make sure that together we form the largest conglomerate of most possible skills that you can think of here, including the collectivos. And seeing the list here prompts me to say that I'm lucky enough to have been invited to also be a part of the core team, which I think helps a lot with what I can bring to the table when me and Sandra are working on this. So I look forward to your questions and answers, but now I pass it back to Greg and Monica.
Thank you, Alex. And then we wanted to speak more about what we're doing now with the Buscadoras Research Unit. So it's a very important element, and we have decided to continue with the Buscadoras Research Unit, which is part of the collaboration we have with the Center for Mexican and Central America Studies, and also with the guidance of and leadership of the Professor Claudio Lobnitz. So we continued collaborating and looking for students that were interested in working with us and volunteering and doing research. So we launched a call for applications, I think a couple of months ago, and we got a lot of interest from students to continue doing this work and this research and supporting the project. So right now we have 10 students from Colombia, from all parts like college, master's, PhDs, from different, we have from the School of General Studies, the School of International Affairs, Law School, the School of Arts. So we have created a very diverse team with different skill sets, from people studying film or people studying law or public affairs, gaining all different perspectives to support and continue doing the research and helping us with this project. No, so the Bruce, as we call it, the Buscadoras Research Unit, has been supporting us with the Bridging the Search, the documentation project, in doing like the research, helping us with documenting and looking and searching for the organizations, for the repository and their directory, but also working together to do the transcriptions for the capsules, doing the coding, and then furtherly helping us doing the edition. And also in the other part of the data and the visualizations, helping us with also doing the research and supporting the different elements. So we have co-created like this very collaborative space with students, and also having their support and their skill sets, and also having trainings and workshops for them, like in mental health because of this topic, but also like in oral histories. So having like these two sides of working on the research, but also giving some trainings and skill sets and knowledge for them to continue collaborating in this project. And this has been possible, as I mentioned, because of the Center for Mexican Studies and Central American Studies, due to these partnerships and collaborations that we have with them, but also we have, as they have mentioned before, like this collaboration with the Centro del Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México, which is a university in Mexico, also collaborating with a oral history specialist, an organization for journalists in Mexico called Artículo 19. So we've been working with many, as Alex mentioned before, with many different groups, and we think that this academic research part of having students from the university is very important for the continuity of this project, as these partnerships and allies that we have for the development of this project.
Yeah, another note on that is we found that it was pretty important, considering our project in the long run for longevity and further maintenance, to have these sets of alliances and collaborations. And speaking to what Nara was talking about earlier, I think it's incredibly important to have this for any project, with an applied component, because not only will it allow us to, does this, our actual ongoing collaborations and alliances allow us to have different perspectives, but it also allows us to have different channels for expression or circulating information, new opportunities, and lets us hear different sides and different perspectives of what's going on in Mexico and what we're talking, our theme, our general theme. It's also, in the same vein, we thought it was incredibly important to offer something for the students, and not just besides an honorarium and you know, like the experience and something to put on their CV. So every time we need a training to do some sort of specific thing, whether that be to learn how to get into the website to fix some issues, to reach different audiences, or to write in a particular genre, or to conduct a particular type of research, such as oral history versus ethnographic interviews. We wanted to involve the students and give them the opportunity to take these trainings that we have, to getting their hands dirty. In the future, we haven't started yet, but as we start speaking with more people that work inside the institutions in Mexico, or we get the opportunity to speak with more people from different solidarity organizations or different colectivos, but they aren't necessarily on the ground being interviewed with our team who has the cameras and the microphones. Rather, we'll do what we did with the BRU last year, because we were in COVID times, and we will have meetings with the whole BRU as well as the entire investigative unit, and sort of have conversations and brainstorming sessions with these different people to show what this collaborative ethnographic adjacent work is in practice. And another idea is to allow for this involvement in this among the students, to create space for their own ideas, and so we can listen from them and gain from their own experience too. And this all has informed what we're thinking about doing in the future, which depends largely on funding, as most things do. And already from doing our research and speaking with the people that we've been speaking with since last year, for example, the Colectivo in Morelos, we found another avenue in which we might be able to help with institutional backing, with resources coming from a funding foundation or an institution, and the sort of social, scientific, and journalistic perspective, know-how, and hands on deck. For example, some colectivos will go out to a particular search site and find a lot of evidence, clothes in a plastic bag that's off to the side, that they're saying, we need to look at this and we need to document the clothes in this bag. Whereas the police officers or the forensic anthropologists or just state actors will say, that's not real evidence. People throw bags of clothes around all the time. So hearing the experience from the colectivos, we thought that should we get the chance in the future, we could generate a component to digitalize these documents that they have created of documenting these different pieces of evidence that the state is not documenting. And a more ambitious version of this would to create some sort of system for cross-referencing that would be secure and safe. Gathering further data is, we're going to keep doing what we're doing now, because the thing about this topic is that it's always changing, it's always shifting, and some data may be good today, but it may be good to a certain extent that is only evident tomorrow. So this is a very crucial component to the research that we're doing and the effectiveness of our analysis. Sadly, that isn't always what, continuing the same thing doesn't always get more money. So we have to be innovative as well, right? Another thing that we found already in speaking with people is that individuals that aren't necessarily allied or part of colectivos in Mexico often are left outside of movements or events or information circulation. And there's a lot of different reasons why colectivos form and why there's individuals outside of them, or there's a lot of different reasons why this colectivo collaborates well with this one, but not with the other one. Nonetheless, we wanted to think of ways that we could generate knowledge from our position that is accessible to all of the above, that is conducive to collaboration and intercommunication among these people, as well as people who are kind of flying it solo. And this, of course, will entail new partnerships and new collaborations. This is specifically, this became evident early on when we were trying to find a place to house the oral histories we want to produce. And the Columbia Library was, the first idea. And then upon going to them, it turns out that there's a 10-year waiting list, which makes sense because this is not easy work. So what can we do in the meantime? How can we create oral histories and create an impact with them in a way that that is similar to the impact that it would have if it were in the library here at Columbia, but also it led us to think about broader horizons for oral histories that aren't just something that people and like researchers would go to a very particular library because they know about it. That led us to think about different institutions in Mexico as well as the United States, and also think about security concerns and information and data and what it is that we're putting out there, and the people who are giving us, like allowing us to do this with the information about their lives, what it is that they know about the venues in which that we're going to be sharing this data, but also the types of people that are going to be reading what and listening and watching what we're creating. And it's extremely important to make sure that everybody's on the same page with this is what this is what it will look like, this is the potential meanings it could have, and this is where it will go, and this is who's going to be consuming it. But yeah, this looking forward part in the last bit was trying to sort of dovetail the conversation into applied academic projects. And I think that I've been for example, last year when we were doing the BRU, I also got involved with a solidarity organization here in New York to try to raise money for the National Search Brigade that happens every year in Mexico, where dozens of colectivos come together to help each other search. They swap ideas, they go to churches, they create new alliances, and they do this for 2 weeks in a decided upon place. And through working with the Solidarity organization here in New York to try to raise money for that, we figured out some things that you can do with a solidarity organization that you can't do with an institutionally based organization, and vice versa. So I think it was particularly helpful for this project to have that perspective of both, to see what an institution's limitations are, but how you can still integrate things together to make to maximize impact. I think, sorry, that's it. So discussion and Q&A.
Thank you so much to our three speakers. We're going to open up the floor, as it were, the virtual floor for questions. That was really so interesting. I have tons of questions, but I don't want to monopolize the rectangle. So if people want to either put up their hand or jump into the circle or put their question in the chat, we would love to hear from you. Maybe I'll get us started with a question, and again, encourage people in the audience to ask their questions as well, or formulate their questions in the meantime. I'm curious, in this project, I mean, one of the things that's so interesting and ambitious about it is that you're talking to multiple audiences with very different interests. You're talking to current buscadoras, presumably future buscadoras, colectivos, members of the public who maybe are interested but don't know anything about this issue, journalists, academics. I'm curious whether there are maybe tensions among those different audiences. Are there moments when you've had to make a hard decision about which audience you are going to service, or so far has that actually not been an issue, and these very distinct audiences have actually been quite complementary in your experience?
The age-old question, Monica.
Yeah, that has been that question, I think, since the beginning of the project, since we were trying to cover most of the audiences that you mentioned. So we have had to try and focus, especially like in one, and who would be the main audience for this and why. So we, after like discussing and having like these conversations, we know this is like for many different audiences, but like our main audience is like the colectivos and also like those potential people that will have someone, or that kind of have someone to look for, like in a pedagogical way, like for them, like the capsulas for them to be useful if they need to find, to search, to reach out to a colectivo, the directory, to look for the organizations already working on that, to visualize a map in which they can find where they can get help or support. So yeah, like it has been difficult to maintain how is the level also of knowledge from the capsulas, no? Like how much information is it for someone that it's like just starting their search, or someone that is experienced enough? So we're focusing on that, but we also know that there are a lot of other audiences that will be reaching out for the information that it will also be useful for them. I don't know, Greg, if you want to complement.
No,
I can.
yeah, Dale.
A lot of this heavy lifting is going to be done by the web design, where we channel audiences to different parts. But what Monica says holds true to most of the web design, which is that we're building number one for the colectivos and the people who are had just unfortunately landed in the situation of being buscadora. So first them, and most of the modules will be done for them. Then there are a few modules that we can gravitate audiences that we can call the general public to. Like, for example, in the About page, this is where we can introduce the some of the issues here for people who don't know anything. But they are so they're getting a smaller piece of the pie, but we're not neglecting them. It's because these kind of websites have so many different moving parts. I don't think you have to sacrifice one audience necessarily because you focused on another. It's one of those things where, like, you know, there's so many of these websites out there where it's like you select what role you play. Like, are you a reader or are you a writer? You know, and then you navigate to different parts of the site. So we will be doing a lot of that sort of selection in the user interface. It's a challenge, but I think the whole team is clear that we want to make sure that the Buscadoras are the number one. Interestingly enough, it's also a temporal issue. So the Buscadoras are the number one audience right now. 10 years from now, the number one audience will be researchers looking back. So hopefully this is not an eternal problem that Mexico has. This is a problem that does not want to keep us employed. This is one of those things where, like, this is the type of problem where we wish we were unemployed, that we weren't doing it, right? So we have to think about, also because of temporality of like what the grant funding issues that were mentioned above. We want to make sure that this also serves as a document of the now for 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It becomes a historical documentation project. So that's, again, this is a triple challenge because we have to think about how the audience changes as time passes. But not a challenge that we bulk away from, one that we accept, and we'll see what solutions we come up with.
And so far, between the journalists and the anthropologists, there has been no internal conflict. So we're pretty good on that front too.
So we have another question in the chat from Alexander Hiller, who asks, are there any upcoming ways for current Columbia students to get involved and help the project?
Great question. Send us an email. I'm interested in hearing it. We'll drop our information here at the end of this and send an email. right now. Monica, what are you thinking about?
Yes, I mean, we closed the call for applications, but we're open when people want to volunteer or collaborate. We have, like you can send us an email and we can see, we can send you a form and you can share your skills so we can see how we can, keep collaborating with people that want to be part of the project. So yeah.
Yeah, for example, we have some people that have volunteered, and not always do we have an immediate slot to put people in. That sounds bad. We don't want to put people in slots, but a job for people. But they become evident over time as well. And they, according to the different skill sets that different people have. For example, people who are here in New York that have experience with doing similar types of research in person with groups like this or organizing groups, it could be beneficial to have a team here that visits different events that's happening in New York City by the colectivos or organizations here that are working on the theme. And that's just one of, there's always more transcription to do.
And translation.
And translation.
And translation and
So
video.
Yeah.
Video editing might be needed in case
Yes.
some of those oral histories, we want to blur the faces of people, or for example, there's definitely always going to be video cleaning, etc. It's depending on your skills. There's always roles for you to play. Playing a division of labor is not necessarily bad. When you're working with something that has such a large scope as this does, everybody having the roles very clear is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Which reminds me something, since I have all of your attention here in this call, and this is an important part of the future, since Greg said that you have to come up with innovative ways to innovate. This project already has a huge scope already. It is something you don't want to add to the scope of this project. You definitely do not want to innovate on this, but you do want to have new content coming in the future. You probably want refreshing of the content and this kind of stuff. So this is a challenge to ELAS, that if the kind of support that this project needs in the future is the kind of support that would allow the core team to continue to rally that content, to curate it, clean it, translate it, etc., without bringing in not a single new feature. It is already difficult enough to finish this project in the year, in the time that we have left. Sandra and me are almost done with the first mock-up of the site. Something that Greg and Monica doesn't know, but we're about to show them next week, and we actually are going to start needing some of that data to start populating the site with real data. But it is already clear to me from having done the architecture of this site that you don't want to add it to this site. So for possible funding opportunities, we want everybody on the call to understand that we want this project to be supported without growing the actual things it's doing. Just the parts that were mentioned already. It'll be great just to have new content on those parts. And it is true, people who give you funding never give you funding for simply doing more of the same research. And that's a sad state of affairs. Hopefully this project can serve as a different way, as a portal into different ways of funding research of this kind in the future. Man, I'm looking at you because I know that you might play an important role in helping us secure some of these funding.
Yes, we're happy to be seed funding, as they call it. I would love to say we have a multi-million-dollar budget so that we could start, giving money away. We don't, but we can. I mean, you guys have been extraordinarily successful already. I mean, who gets a grant called magic? I mean, right there. But yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, what can I say? Build a building. That's what people like to give, college presidents money to do. Are there other questions that the audience has? We had a question from Alejandra Carrillo. Can alums get involved? Do students have to be current students, could alums, or maybe even folks outside the university get involved in this project?
No, yes, I'm an alumni. Yeah. So yeah, we have also, as Greg mentioned, that people that were part of the brew last year are also now part of our like Bridging the Search team. So yeah, of course we welcome everyone. So send us an email. We will share the information. And yeah, you can be part also.
Yeah.
Great. Other questions? Oh, go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say, it seems related to the theme that we're talking about in terms of sustainability and trying to make an ethical, thought out impact. It's on the topic of Semecas and ILAs. Like, first of all, we wouldn't be able to do this if it weren't for y'all, and I really, infinite gratitude and thank you for the support that y'all have shown us. And it's really nice collaborating with Semecas and being here and feeling like we're at home. And we also have already established a rapport. Man, I lost it. It'll come back. But I did want to get the thank you out there. That was important.
You're gonna ask that one way to volunteer is for anybody listening in on the call to, if they know of stable sources of funding. And we're not talking about that much. We're talking about like this project can probably keep on going with 25K a year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but part of the creation of the project, the fact that we have more data that we can do something with, the fact that we could keep producing more capsulas is also incredibly important. I think, just as Alex was saying, though we're using the same structure, though we're really not building it, in the event that we receive funding for a continuance and not necessarily an innovation, there's so much left on the table that could even, I'm in this until, I can't anymore, but in the day that Monica and myself, in an ideal future where this project outlives our own participation, there will still be work to do, and not just work to do, there's materials with which you can do that work.
Yeah, it's super interesting to hear you all talking. And yeah, I'm seeing people in the chat asking, please tell us who the best person to contact to get involved with is. Put your email in the chat. So hopefully one of you can do that. And I was just going to say, I mean, thinking about this, it makes me think that, I mean, while Semeca has very shallow pockets, one thing that we could do is try to organize some sort of maybe workshop for our projects. And invite funders. I mean, not like I have like lots of friends who are, philanthropists, but, there are a few people out there I could think of who might be interested, and, sort of invite them in. And and you can, you sort of, they could shop projects, or you all can share what you're doing. And at the very least, even if they're not interested in funding, they might be able to suggest how to pitch your project or to whom to pitch your project. So that seems like something we could do. And that's the sort of thing that we could do in a centralized manner for you all, rather than having each individual project go out and try and, beat the bushes of who there is at the Carnegie Endowment Foundation or whatever.
That sounds perfect. Yeah.
That sounds really good. Like also, this is something where I can imagine the communications office of the university getting involved with all 5 projects. And because if you get an in with the communications office, you actually get an in also with the development office. So it's like, because the development office, they actually just pay attention to whatever the comms office is doing. So if you get the comms office to care about these projects, and I think that's not going to be hard because the projects are all amazing, then this might be, this might have legs. And I like that. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know we're talking inside baseball now for the people who are joining from outside Colombia. This is
Yeah. No, this is good. I mean, this is what these workshops are supposed to do, is, maybe brainstorm ideas as well, talk through, sort of the conceptual bases of these projects, but also to think about the nuts and bolts of how you keep them going, as you suggest, how to start them running, and then how to keep them running, which seems really critical. And maybe you know, I think a challenge of this kind of applied academic work. Academic projects often come to an end, but applied projects may have a different lifespan. So what is the ethical, you know, commitment that one takes on when one begins a project like this?
This one in particular can be thought out for most people for whom the tech is still a sort of black box, a sort of mystery. One way to think about it that is helpful is to think about it in terms of book volumes. So one can think of the first year as volume 1, and what one is looking for funding for is for volume 2. This is a way to think about the way, specifically about the way that we're doing this project, not as this kind of like open-ended digital portal, but as something that actually can be contained in terms of its content to the first volume to be released at the end of this year, and in a similar fashion, a volume 2 with just new content, new research in it for part 2. That might help understand more or less, and volume 3, volume 4, so forth. Not as a continuation to something that imagines itself to be this open-ended thing that will never end, which is something I've encouraged the team to not do from day one.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Alex is crucial.
Are there any other questions in the audience about the project for Greg, Monica, and Alex?
I see there's a question about, maybe it was just sent to me, that is, are you incorporating or documenting evidence of immigrants who die in the border territories of the United States and who haven't been identified by their loved ones? Yes, like we understand like also the phenomenon of like migration and displacement going through Mexico and like in the desert, especially in the border. We are connecting with organizations. I mean, they're not called colectivos, but they are organizations that look for disappeared migrants in the desert. So we are trying to incorporate the migratory part and like that context on how there are also disappearances of migrants in Mexico and in the border, and also like this being bilingual and also like trying to get awareness from the US or like universities here. We are like also trying to incorporate that component. So the short answer is yes.
That's a fascinating question, and it makes me think, speaking in Alex's terms about like, you know, you have to define what you're doing and what you're not doing, lest it, you know, it become unwieldy. But it does seem that introduces a whole nother component of talking to Buscadoras who are Central American, right? Central American mothers who have relocated to Mexico to search for their missing migrant children and organize around that issue. So how do you draw the line between the colectivos work and that work? That's more a rhetorical question than it is an actual question, I think. Are there any more questions from the audience? We said that this event would last 1 hour and we are now 6 minutes over. So I want to give us just a couple more minutes if there are any additional questions that people have for our speakers, about their project, about the phenomenon of disappearance.
Well, if nobody has any questions, I want us to thank all of you for coming to the workshop. And of course to Semeca and to Ilas for having us and for the support.
Yeah, absolutely. Wouldn't be here without you.
And for Nara in particular for driving that point home about scope in the end. With one of the most difficult things to scope is not even the technical side. The most difficult thing to scope is the concepts. The identities that people adopt. That is so hard. I have it easy. I just have to worry about the scope of the technical side.
Yeah, the technical is never just technical, as you, that's your raison d'etre, I'm sure. So thanks everyone for being with us. Please stay in touch with us at Semeca or get in touch with Greg and Monica if you're interested in this particular project. Perhaps some of you are interested in the idea of working as an assistant, maybe this year or next on this or another project. If that's the case, please do be in touch also with Semeca. We put our information in the chat again. Maybe we'll keep the Zoom meeting open for another couple minutes as people sign off in case there's anyone that wanted to ask a question for our speakers or to the center. But we want to thank you for your attendance and good luck with finals, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.